When I first got the job at Kessler and Maddox Consulting, I thought I'd made it. I was 23, fresh out of the University of North Carolina, with a degree in business communications and a resume that screamed entry-level but hungry. I'd interned, networked, built a halfway decent LinkedIn profile, and when I finally got the email that said, "We're pleased to offer you," I swear I screamed into my pillow like a teenager who just got tickets to Beyoncé. The firm was in Charlotte, sleek downtown building, 22nd floor, full of glass walls, minimalist furniture, and cold brew taps in the break room. Everything about it said success. The kind of place that made you sit up straighter just walking through the lobby. And my boss? Ethan Voss. Late 30s. Polished. Harvard grad. Tall, expensive suits. He had this energy, like he always knew something you didn't. People admired him, feared him a little too. Interns whispered his name like he was part legend, part cautionary tale. But to me, on day one, he just seemed like a high-powered exec who got things done. And honestly, he was charming, in that corporate, rehearsed kind of way. He complimented my onboarding presentation. Told me I had executive presence, whatever that means. He even remembered where I was from, mentioned how he loved Asheville when he did a hiking trip years ago. For the first couple weeks, I thought, wow. Maybe I landed in the right place. I was assigned as his junior associate, meaning I handled meeting prep, ran reports, took notes, and followed up on the dozens of things he didn't have time to deal with. It was stressful, sure. But I'm not scared of stress. I've worked since I was 16. I know how to hustle. I also knew, early on, that I had to be twice as sharp, not just because I was one of the youngest women in the room, but because I was not going to be the intern stereotype. No flirty laughs, no careless mistakes, no standing by the Keurig pretending I didn't hear the latest passive-aggressive comment. I kept my head down and worked. The first month flew by. I got good feedback, hit my KPIs, and started taking the lead on some pitch decks. I stayed late, showed up early. You know the drill. It wasn't glamorous, but I felt like I was building something real. But slowly, things started to shift. It was little stuff at first. Like, I'd come into the office and find a coffee on my desk, not from the intern, but from Ethan. He'd say, "Thought you'd need a boost this morning," and smile like it was nothing. And I'd just thank him, because what else do you say when your boss gives you something? Then there were the compliments. Not just about my work. One day, I wore a navy dress, professional, knee-length, nothing flashy, and he said, "That color really works on you. You should wear it more often." Totally normal, right? But then he lingered. Looked me up and down like I was part of the branding deck. Still, I brushed it off. "You're being paranoid, Julia. Don't overthink it. He's just confident. Friendly." But my gut was starting to twitch, the way it does when you know something's off but can't quite explain why yet. The turning point came during a team happy hour. We were at this rooftop bar a couple blocks from the office. Everyone was relaxed, laughing, letting off steam after a brutal client cycle. I had one drink, and Ethan came over while I was talking to two of the other associates. He put his hand on my lower back. Subtle. Low. Just enough to send a chill through my spine. He leaned in and said, "You're wasted, aren't you?" and chuckled like we had some private joke. I wasn't wasted. Not even close. I laughed it off, tight, polite, and moved away. But I noticed something, the other associates? They didn't even blink. Like this was just normal. The next morning, he sent me a message on Slack. "You good? You seemed off last night." I didn't reply for an hour. When I did, I just said, "All good. Thanks." But after that, the tone of everything changed. Meetings got colder. Deadlines got tighter. He stopped copying me on key emails. I was being left out of briefings I used to lead. When I finally asked him about it, in a one-on-one, he smiled and said, "I just think you've been distracted lately. Maybe stretched too thin." I walked out of that room with a knot in my stomach. I wasn't being paranoid. He was punishing me. I didn't flirt back. I didn't play along. And now, he was slowly icing me out. This wasn't about performance. This was personal. And in that moment, I realized, I was either going to let this man shrink me down until I disappeared, or I was going to fight back. But first, I needed proof. After Ethan started freezing me out, I knew I couldn't pretend things would just fix themselves. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a man used to control, realizing he couldn't manipulate me, and now finding ways to punish me for it. But what I didn't know then was that things were about to get much worse. 2 weeks after the happy hour, I was staying late one evening, finishing up a quarterly report for our major tech client. Most of the office had cleared out by 6:30, but I stuck around, headphones in, head down. Around 7:15, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Ethan. I pulled out one earbud, and before I could say anything, he said, "Come into my office when you're done. Just a quick chat." I nodded, half expecting it to be about the revised strategy doc. Maybe he was finally going to stop the cold shoulder routine. I walked into his office 10 minutes later. He was sitting behind his desk, blazer off, sleeves rolled up. The lights were dimmed, not off, but soft. He gestured to the seat across from him like we were about to have a casual debrief, not a one-on-one in a room that suddenly felt too quiet. I sat down, notebook in hand, trying to look unfazed. Then he said it. "Julia. I think we got off on the wrong foot after the team event. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable." I blinked. That caught me off guard. I didn't expect an apology. But before I could even process that, he leaned forward and added, "I like you. You've got talent. A lot of people here, they don't. You've got something extra." My stomach tightened. He wasn't talking about my analytics reports. "I've helped people before," he continued. Quietly. Moved them up. Got them better opportunities, more visibility. I could do that for you." He smiled. That same smug, knowing smile. But it helps to have a mutual understanding. A mutual understanding. There it was. Not even thinly veiled. I stared at him. My face didn't move. Not an inch. But inside, I felt like a freight train was barreling through my chest. I said, "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." He smiled again, leaned back, and said, in the most casual tone imaginable, "Let's not pretend. I know attraction when I see it." My throat tightened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the chair across the room. But I just sat there, still, like I was studying him under a microscope. Because I knew, right in that moment, if I reacted emotionally, he'd spin it. He'd twist it. Make me the unstable one. The overreacting girl. So instead, I said, "I think I'm done here." I stood up and left his office without another word. As I walked to the elevator, my hands were trembling. My mouth was dry. My entire body felt like it was buzzing, like I'd just stepped into a live wire. He wasn't just making a pass. He was laying out a deal. Sleep with me, or I'll bury you professionally. The next day, everything changed again. Suddenly, I was assigned to the most tedious tasks. No more client-facing work. No more team meetings. He told another manager I was struggling with focus, and I found out because someone on the admin team overheard and warned me in the break room. I started documenting everything. Emails. Slack messages. Notes from meetings. Every time I was excluded or talked down to, I wrote it down. Dated. Time-stamped. And the worst part? No one else seemed surprised. People knew what Ethan was like. They just didn't want to say it out loud. They didn't want to be next. The final straw? We were in a full team strategy meeting one Thursday. I raised a question about the Q3 projections, pointing out a gap in the data. It was valid. Important, actually. Ethan looked me dead in the eye and said, in front of the entire room. Why don't you leave the math to the people trained for it, Julia? The room went still. No one spoke. No one defended me. I swallowed the lump in my throat, smiled politely, and said, noted. But in my head, I was done playing defense. It was time to go on offense. You always hear stories about how women get pushed out quietly, like it's a slow leak nobody notices until the tires are flat. But with Ethan, it wasn't quiet. It was calculated. After I refused his proposal, the shift went from subtle sabotage to full-on war. At first, it was emails, little things, like being left off project updates or getting copied on threads at the last second, so I always looked behind. I tried to speak to the project lead about it, Darren, one of the senior consultants, but he just gave me that sympathetic shrug. Hey, not my place. Just doing what Ethan says. So I adjusted. I started double-checking shared drives, logging everything, backing up my own work outside of the main servers. I wasn't going to give Ethan a single inch. But he didn't need a reason to twist things. He just made them up. One Monday morning, I walked in to find my name removed from a deliverables report, a project I had led from start to finish. My name wasn't on the doc. Not even in the credits. When I confronted him, he smirked and said, I didn't think you wanted to be associated with it, given your recent performance issues. Performance issues? I'd been pulling 11-hour days, hitting every deadline, cleaning up other people's messes, and he had the audacity to say that? I didn't yell. I didn't argue. But that night, I cried in my car for 45 minutes in a dark parking garage. That kind of rage, the kind you can't express because you know it'll just make you the emotional one. That's the hardest part. The silence you're forced to carry. But I wasn't the only one noticing. One afternoon, Alyssa, a soft-spoken analyst from marketing, sat next to me in the break room and whispered, he did this to Rachel too. Back in 2019. Everyone knew. She left within 2 months. I leaned in. What happened to her? Alyssa hesitated. Then she said, he got ahead of it. Started dropping hints that she was unstable. She ended up taking a job in Denver. Never even tried to fight it. My stomach dropped. He had a pattern. And he was following it with me, step by step. Then came the HR meeting. I was called in for a routine performance check-in. Routine, my ass. Sitting across the table from Deirdre, our HR manager, I could see the notes already printed and clipped in front of her. We've received some concerns about your recent collaboration style, she began, voice overly even. Some colleagues have described your behavior as defensive. Unapproachable. One person even said you seemed emotionally reactive. I laughed, not because it was funny. Because it was textbook. He was pre-building a case. Not to fire me right away, but to discredit me first. So when I finally cracked and said something, I'd look unhinged. Like I was spiraling. But I was done being cornered. Can I see those statements? I asked, keeping my tone calm. Deirdre blinked. That's not standard. Then I'd like to submit my own record, I said. In writing. With full documentation. She raised an eyebrow. I pulled out a thick folder, timestamps, emails, screenshots. Dates and times Ethan excluded me from meetings. Slack messages with his passive-aggressive comments. The iced-out tasks. Even a dated list of compliments he gave me that were clearly inappropriate. She looked down at the stack like it was radioactive. I said, please add this to my file. Her voice cracked, just a little. I'll have to speak with legal. Good. Let them. Because that week? Ethan pushed even harder. He started whispering to other team leads that I wasn't, well. That I'd been acting erratically. He questioned the accuracy of my reports, quietly, of course, and a few junior analysts suddenly stopped talking to me unless they had to. I saw it happening in real time. Isolation. Undermining. Reputation erosion. Every tactic out of the abuser's handbook, just dressed in corporate lingo. But what Ethan didn't know. I wasn't documenting this alone anymore. Alyssa started forwarding me messages. Another colleague, Marcus, from IT, quietly offered to recover email deletions from shared folders. And one night, I got an anonymous file in my inbox. Subject: You're not crazy. Attached were Slack messages between Ethan and a male manager, joking crudely about handling Julia. One of them even said, "Should have just played along like the last one. Now she's going full HR." I read that line 3 times. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. It was bigger. It was systemic. And if I didn't burn it all down now, someone else would walk right into this same trap later. I looked in the mirror that night and said to myself, "You're not just fighting for your job. You're fighting for your name." And I wasn't going to let him take either. By the time I got that anonymous email, the one with the screenshot and the subject line, "You're not crazy," something inside me clicked. All the fear, all the hesitation, all the second guessing, it just stopped. I realized I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't emotional. I was being targeted. And now, I had the beginning of a trail. That night, I created a private folder on an encrypted external drive I bought from a tech store across town. I didn't keep anything on the company computer. Nothing on my cloud accounts. I started compiling everything: emails, Slack messages, performance reviews, schedule records, even timestamps on deleted file logs that Marcus from IT quietly pulled for me. I gave the folder a name I'd remember but no one would ever suspect. Quarterly Forecasts, 2021. Inside that folder, proof of a man who thought he was untouchable. But I wasn't going to just sit on it. I needed more. I needed voices. So I started reaching out, quietly. I found Rachel, the woman Alyssa had mentioned. The one Ethan allegedly ran out back in 2019. She lived in Denver now, working remotely for a finance startup. It took her a couple of days to respond to my LinkedIn message. But when she did, she didn't hold back. "I should have fought him," she wrote. "But I was 25 and scared. I thought no one would believe me. He told HR I had a mental breakdown. Said I made up a relationship that didn't exist. Then he buried my career with vague conduct concerns. I signed an NDA and took a settlement. I still have nightmares about that place." I asked if she'd be willing to talk to HR with me. She said she couldn't. The NDA made it legally risky. But she sent me screenshots from a burner email she used back then. Messages from Ethan. One of them read, "We don't have to make this messy, Rachel. Just take the deal. It's best for your future." My blood went cold reading that. He'd done this before, word for word. I saved the screenshots in my encrypted folder and backed everything up onto a second drive I stored in my sock drawer at home. At work, I kept my head down. Smiled. Nodded. Didn't give Ethan any reason to see me coming. But behind the scenes, I was building something airtight. Every time he made a snide comment, I'd jot it down in my planner with the time, date, and who was in the room. When he emailed someone about Julia's attitude, I'd mirror the tone back with calm, professional responses, every sentence crafted like it would end up in court. Because one day, it just might. Marcus even installed a passive tracking log in the shared project folder. Legally murky? Maybe. But if Ethan tried deleting more records? We'd know when, where, and from which machine. Then came the turning point. One Friday morning, I walked into the office and found a formal letter on my desk. Performance Improvement Plan. A PIP. I stared at it like it was some twisted joke. After everything I'd done, after hitting every single measurable target, staying late, covering for others, he was trying to force me out under the guise of non-collaborative behavior and disruptive communication. It was so clean. So perfectly worded. I could practically hear his voice in the phrasing, "We want to set you up for success." I took it straight to HR. I asked to speak with Deirdre. This time, I brought a printout of the anonymous Slack messages and one of Rachel's emails, with her name redacted. When Deirdre saw the messages, she blinked. Her hands stiffened. Then she whispered something I'll never forget. "We've had concerns about him before. But nothing ever stuck." I replied, "Well, it's about to." I requested a formal investigation. Deirdre said she'd escalate it to legal and compliance. That same afternoon, Marcus let me know something big. Ethan had wiped his Slack DMs using admin privileges. Messages, conversations, audit logs, gone. But what he didn't know? Marcus had already duplicated the server logs to an offline backup. I had everything. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to expose him. Expose how he preyed on employees. How he erased women's careers. How he weaponized HR policy like a scalpel, clean, clinical, and devastating. And this time, he wasn't dealing with someone scared or silent. He was dealing with someone who documented every breath he took, and had receipts backed by witnesses, screenshots, and hard drives. That weekend, I contacted a workplace attorney. Her name was Melissa Grant, and she specialized in corporate retaliation and sexual harassment cases. I gave her everything. And she looked me in the eye and said, "This isn't just a complaint, Julia. This is a case." And suddenly, I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting to bring down the entire mask Ethan had worn for years. The next move? Legal action. Official HR complaints. And, eventually, making it public. Because predators like Ethan thrive in silence. And I was done being quiet. There's something terrifying about pressing send on a legal complaint, especially when it's against a man as powerful as Ethan Voss. But once I handed everything over to Melissa, my attorney, the fears started turning into fuel. She was a powerhouse, sharp eyes, clipped tone, no nonsense. After reviewing my documentation, she said, "You've got a pattern of retaliation, hostile work environment, and potential coercion. If the company doesn't act, they're complicit." That was all I needed to hear. We drafted a formal complaint addressed to both HR and the corporate legal team. It included detailed accounts of Ethan's inappropriate behavior, screenshots of Slack conversations, metadata logs recovered by Marcus, redacted statements from Rachel and Alyssa, a timeline of retaliatory actions against me. It was bulletproof. When Deirdre from HR saw it, her face turned pale. This wasn't the typical whisper in the hallway complaint anymore. This was a formal legal issue, with the potential to explode if handled poorly. By Monday morning, Ethan had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. It happened fast. An email was sent to all staff. Effective immediately, Ethan Voss will be out of office while we conduct a standard procedural review. No details. No admissions. But I knew what it meant. Behind closed doors, the company's general counsel was already scrambling. I was instructed not to discuss the case with anyone internally, but that didn't stop people from whispering. Slack channels buzzed quietly. Coworkers stopped making eye contact with me in the hallway. Some avoided me entirely, afraid of being caught in the middle. But a few quietly offered their support. One of them, Priya, a UX strategist, sent me a DM that simply said, "I don't know what happened. But I believe you." That one line? It kept me going through everything that followed. The investigation was brutal. There were interviews, cross-examinations, calendar audits, and digital forensics. Melissa coached me through every step: how to answer neutrally, how to avoid legal traps, how to remain composed when they tried to poke holes in my credibility. Because they did try. At one point, corporate counsel asked if perhaps I had misread Ethan's intentions. Suggested that maybe there was just a communication gap. I didn't flinch. I said, when a man twice your age tells you he can boost your career if you're willing to be more than professional, that's not a gap. That's abuse of power. Melissa sat next to me with the faintest smile. She knew I nailed it. Then came the retaliation review. Every single time Ethan had excluded me, embarrassed me, or tried to damage my reputation, it was there. Logged. Verified. Marcus's logs showed Slack messages Ethan had tried to permanently delete. One in particular stood out. She won't last the quarter. Either she quits, or I'll bury her in process notes. That was it. That line broke the dam. 3 days later, I got an email from legal. The investigation has concluded. You will be receiving a full summary shortly. In the meantime, please schedule a meeting with senior HR leadership. When I stepped into that meeting, Deirdre was joined by Charles Morton, the firm's VP of Human Capital. Clean-shaven, formal voice, exactly the kind of executive you'd send in to deliver controlled damage. He cleared his throat and said, "First of all, we want to sincerely thank you for coming forward. Your courage and meticulous record-keeping brought to light conduct that is completely unacceptable by any measure." Translation. We have no legal defense. He continued. Effective immediately, Ethan Voss has been terminated from the company. All performance notes filed against you during his tenure have been expunged. Your record is being reinstated with commendation for professionalism under pressure. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. But inside, I wanted to scream. Not in joy. In relief. He was gone. Officially. Publicly. Irreversibly. But it wasn't over. Melissa had already begun preparing for civil action, because even with his firing, the damage he tried to do to my career, my mental health, and my professional reputation deserved real accountability. We filed for defamation and workplace retaliation. The company offered a settlement quietly. A 6-figure one. But more importantly, they agreed to implement mandatory third-party harassment audits, anonymous misconduct reporting systems, and a reformed HR review process. That part? That mattered more than the money. Because it meant no one else would have to suffer in silence again. No one else would be isolated, gaslit, or forced out just for saying no. And Ethan? Well, word travels fast. Within a week of his termination, his LinkedIn was wiped clean. His reputation, gone. Industry contacts cut him off. He went from keynote speaker at national summits, to a ghost in the job market. They say when you go up the ladder by stepping on people, the fall is always louder. And trust me, his fall was deafening. You know what no one ever prepares you for? Winning. Not just surviving, winning. Actually watching someone who tried to destroy you crumble under the weight of the truth. Ethan was gone. Officially terminated. Stripped of all internal credentials. Removed from client accounts, erased from Slack, and quietly replaced on the company's org chart with a footnote that read, "Transition in leadership." But word gets out. Faster than you'd think. Within days of his exit, rumors started circling through the consulting circles in Charlotte, and then nationally. Ethan Voss had been one of those golden boys of corporate America, invited to speak at conferences, quoted in Forbes once, interviewed on a leadership podcast where he called himself a mentor first. Disgusting. The first public hit came 2 weeks later. A blog post on Insider People, a respected corporate culture site, published a piece titled, "The Problem with Predatory Leadership, When HR Looks the Other Way." It didn't name Ethan directly, but the details were unmistakable. A senior executive at a Southeast consulting firm, with a pattern of retaliatory behavior against female associates. I didn't write it. But I knew who did. Rachel The article referenced a string of confidential settlements and multiple NDAs signed under pressure. It went viral in under 48 hours. Then the emails started. Journalists, advocates, former coworkers, even strangers on LinkedIn. Messages from women who had seen that article and whispered, "This sounds just like my workplace." And then, one by one, other women from our firm started speaking up. Alyssa shared her story anonymously in a Reddit thread that got thousands of upvotes in a weekend. Someone from the HR department leaked that Ethan had been the subject of at least 3 informal complaints over the past 5 years, all dismissed due to insufficient evidence. Except now, the evidence had a voice. Mine. Meanwhile, Ethan tried to keep it together. He updated his LinkedIn bio to consultant, advisor, thought leader. Thought leader in what? Intimidation? Then came the real blow. One of the keynote conferences he was booked to speak at, ForwardX 2025, a massive national leadership summit in Chicago, dropped him. Publicly. They tweeted. After reviewing recent developments, we have removed Ethan Voss from our speaker lineup. We remain committed to building inclusive and accountable spaces for all. That was it. The career he'd spent 15 years building? Burned in 2 tweets and a headline. But here's the part that really shook me. I got a call one morning from Angela, the firm's newly appointed interim COO. Someone I barely knew, but who had been watching quietly from the wings. She said, "Julia, I want to thank you. What you did, it changed the culture here. We should have acted sooner. But we're acting now." She offered me a promotion, a leadership development track, new title, higher salary, full team. I politely declined. Because I had other plans. I wasn't going to stay in the shadow of a company that needed to be pushed into doing the right thing. But I did agree to one thing. Speaking at the firm's first ever internal equity summit, about toxic power dynamics and what happens when truth becomes louder than silence. I stood on that stage 6 weeks later, in front of 400 employees, many of whom still didn't know the full story, and I said, "You're never too junior to be brave. You're never too young to be right. And you're never too alone to fight back, because even when it feels like no one's listening, someone always is." I walked off that stage to a standing ovation. But the real applause? That came in the quiet messages afterward. "I've been there. Thank you for saying what I never could. You helped me find my voice." And Ethan? Last I heard, he was applying for remote consulting gigs under a shell LLC. His name no longer holds weight. His legacy is a cautionary tale. And the irony? He once told me I'd never survive in this industry without playing the game. Well, I didn't play. I rewrote the rules. After Ethan was gone, and the dust finally settled, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think in months. I was free. No more looking over my shoulder. No more documenting every sentence like it might end up in court. No more pretending to laugh when I wanted to scream. But here's the thing no one tells you about getting justice. It doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't erase the panic attacks I had in the bathroom stall after meetings. It doesn't give me back the nights I stayed awake wondering if I'd be blackballed in my own industry. And it sure as hell doesn't silence the little voice that still whispers, "What if they don't believe you?" But what it does give you, is a choice. A clean page. And I intended to write my next chapter differently. I didn't take the promotion at Kessler and Maddox. I didn't want to rise inside a place that only found its conscience when it was legally cornered. Instead, I resigned, with a short, professional letter that simply read, "Thank you for the lessons. I'm ready for something new." Then I packed up my desk, hugged Alyssa, high-fived Marcus, and walked out the doors of that glass tower one last time. It was raining that day in Charlotte, a soft, steady kind of rain, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like a reset. 2 months later, I launched Clarity & Company, my own boutique consultancy focused on internal culture, team communication, and ethical leadership practices. And yeah, that name? Clarity. That was deliberate. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that toxic systems thrive in confusion. In blurred lines. In silence. I wanted to build a business that did the opposite. One that taught companies how to communicate with clarity. How to lead with integrity. How to spot red flags before they turn into headlines. My first few clients were small, nonprofits, startups, a law firm in Raleigh. But word spread. By the end of the year, I had more work than I could handle, and a waitlist 3 months long. One day, I got an email from a familiar name. Deirdre, the former HR manager at Kessler and Maddox. She'd left the firm too. Said she couldn't stomach how many complaints they'd buried over the years. She asked if I'd consider training the HR team at her new firm. I said yes, on one condition. We talk about systems. Not just symptoms. She agreed. And just like that, I was helping build something better, from the inside out. The funniest part? A few months later, someone forwarded me a job post. It was from a mid-sized consulting firm in New York. The position was listed under a company called Voss and Meyer Solutions, newly formed. Ethan's new project. The listing was desperate. Remote preferred. Flexible equity. Growth stage potential. In other words, please, someone, anyone, take a chance on me. I didn't reply. Didn't share it. Didn't even gloat. I just smiled. Closed the tab. And went back to doing what I loved, helping workplaces become safe, honest, and actually worth showing up for. That was my real revenge. Not the headline. Not the settlement. But the peace that came from knowing I didn't let someone like Ethan define me. I didn't just survive him, I grew past him. And now? I help others do the same. If you're listening to this and you've been made to feel small, cornered, discredited, or ashamed just for standing up for yourself, let me say this clearly. You are not too emotional. You are not overreacting. And you are not alone. Speak. Document. Push back. Even if your voice shakes. Because people like Ethan win when we stay quiet. And I don't know about you. But I've got no intention of ever being quiet again.